All right, we are recording, and it is, well, we don't have our video on from our end. Is there a way to turn that on? Oh, okay. Okay, but we don't have the camera on. Okay. All right, everyone. The delay here is we're trying to get video of our proceedings for everyone there. I will turn on my video here on my laptop. At least I'll be there. Hello, everyone. I'm assuming everyone can hear me. Is that true?
We can hear you, George. Thank you.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much. That sounded like Betsy. Thanks a lot for that. I will call the meeting to order here at 4:02. And apologies for not having the main video working here in the little red schoolhouse. So we'll start with the roll call. I'm here, George Savage, Stephen Casani.
Here.
Ken Levine.
Present.
Chris Rittler.
Here.
Michelle Takai.
Here.
Bill Urban is absent today. And Mark Wacer.
Here.
Great. 6 of the 7 are here. We have a quorum. We'll proceed. Proceeding to number 2, oral communications for items not on the agenda. And, no one in the room? Anyone online? Oh, I'm sorry. Gosh, how'd I miss that? Councilmember Taylor had his hand up, but I had my reading glasses on. I couldn't see him. There we go.
No worries, thank you. So I just wanted to announce that this is Tony's 1-year anniversary. He's been with us 1 year, and the end of his first day was ended with the finance committee meeting. And I'll turn it over to Tony. He might want to say a few, hopefully, kind words.
Thank you for that. No, I just want to acknowledge the 1 year, and also that we've come a long way over the past year. Thank you for your support. Thank you for your feedback and the discussions, the healthy discussions that we've had over the past year in regards to the town's finances. I believe they've been very fruitful. And I think that the town has also appreciated the level of conversations that we have had. And but I've also enjoyed my personal interactions with each and every one of you. Again, I'm happy I'm here, and I'm really happy to be working with this august board. And I just wanted to acknowledge the 1 year and the great working relationship that we have had over the past year. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Craig, and thank you also, Tony. And I know I speak for the entire committee when I want to express our appreciation for having you here for the past year. And I'm sure many members of the community too. I hear nothing but positive feedback, all of it well deserved. Earlier today, I was just thinking about it again as I was reviewing our updates since the last meeting and the quality of the numbers. And the degree of detail and reliability. It's all just fantastic to be in a much better place than we were a year ago, and we're still have a ways to go, but we're getting there.
We still have work to do yet.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, super.
There was one topic I wanted to bring up that I don't think is specifically on the agenda, and I think procedurally this is the time for me to raise that. Is that correct?
That would be right.
So I didn't see it specifically on the agenda, but Tony, I did, and actually, by the way, I echo absolutely everything that George said. It's really, it's been a terrific year working with you, and as I've mentioned to the town council members, I personally think that the biggest financial risk that the town faces is your possible departure. So I just wanted to underscore that risk. With regard to this focus around trying to get caught up on the audited financials, I did go back into the minutes, and specifically the meeting on March the 27th of just this year. We had talked about a schedule for trying to get caught up, and specifically that schedule was for the fiscal year ended June 2022. We were hoping to target this month, May 2025, and then for the next year, June 2023, August of 2025, and then subsequently the years 2024 was going to be pushed back. I'm wondering if you have an update on what that schedule might look like for reviewing the audited financials for years past.
So for 2022, probably will not see audited statements or a draft until July. There's just a few issues that came up, a lot more explanation that needed, and they were requesting a few more items. Plus also working with the budget fee study, just trying to juggle those. 22, 23 will probably be pushed back another few months because of lessons learned from 21, 22 that going to want to go back through the numbers just to make sure that we have everything captured. And then again, 24, 25, we're going to have to negotiate with Maze because then we're now following into their normal audit schedule. But yeah, we're going to have to push them back a couple months.
So what about 24?
We're going to have to work with Maze. Those probably won't be started until probably the first half of 2026.
Okay, and then for 25, therefore, obviously it'll be after,
Yeah.
Also first half of 26 or later? Would you expect?
I believe by the time we're done with 23, 24, 24, 25 is the current year. And we are so current with our current year transactions. I apologize for saying current so many times. That probably by this time next year, we should have 24, 25 started.
Got it. Thank you. Actually, I'm just going to kind of recap this as I'm taking the notes. So draft, and I'm going to use the fiscal year ends. Draft for 22, fiscal year 22 in July of this year. Then August, you said push back from August a few months. So I'm going to say kind of October, December of 2025. And then for 20.
Hi, Corey.
Year, it would be a first half of calendar year 26.
Yeah.
And then for fiscal year 2025, starting in a year from now, May of 2025. Is that,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, May of 2026. Is
Right.
that a fair? Okay, and recognizing, by the way, these are just the best estimates.
Right.
And as I mentioned, I think in a previous meeting, I had the unfortunate experience of having to do 3 audits myself with my chief financial officer, and it is a huge amount of work. And the further back in time you go, the more difficult it becomes. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, correct. Because part of the was the analysis of one year to the next and not being here for that. I had to do a lot more research and also pull from. We have a very few staff that are remaining from those years, so that also delayed getting that back to the auditors. But I mean, just with everything else that's going on, I'm just trying to balance as much as I can.
Great, thank you.
George, if I could interject here, we kind of promised we were going to have this as an agenda item on our agendas. And so maybe we could put that back on. It
Yeah,
somehow dropped off.
Well, I wasn't dropping it off. I plan to cover it in the financial update section as 5A, because that's part of the finance update is where we are in the budget, and the audit. But I figured we're going to get to it anyway, so I don't mind.
Just to clarify, so that in theory, we have to be preparing for an election in July of 26. So there's a chance that the 25 fiscal year audit won't be done by July of 26.
It's a possibility,
Hmm.
but I'm going to have numbers. They're going to be unaudited numbers, but they're going to be numbers.
Okay, I'm not sure how the community
Well,
will
it'll
react.
be like a pro forma,
Okay, yeah.
but it's going to have at least 2 years of current financial data that is accurate and up to date.
Okay, let's look to comments. For other things not on the agenda, I see hands up online. Go first to Betsy Morgantown.
Thank you, George. Yes. First of all, a happy anniversary to Tony. And then secondly, I wanted to make you aware in case you were not. There was an April Town Council meeting at which the consent calendar included an item about how long we would keep records for committees and commissions. And that particularly regards the YouTube video recordings. As we've been talking about lessons learned and the frequency with which we refer to to those lessons, I pondered about the loss of institutional knowledge, particularly given that we have such new staff, that we are the policy that sailed through without comment. The town council was to preserve them by and large for just 2 years. I thought that it might serve this committee to think more carefully about that, because we have learned so much in the last couple of years. I hate to think that it would be trashed. Thank you for all the good work you're doing.
Thank you, Betsy. Next hand I see is Rita. Rita?
Sorry, I was having a problem unmuting. Thank you for taking my comment. Really appreciate the update on the finances and the audit. Well, I guess it was mentioned about the audit, not necessarily the year-end finances for those years. But my question is, because of these new enlightenments, how about the 2021 finances or audit? Do they need to be restated? And I also really want to talk about what Betsy just talked about in all of our archives. You know, this is from 2020, 2021. We have to keep that. And I suggest that this particular committee send the message to the town council asking for records to be kept longer, because based on the vote that happened at that meeting, these records will be destroyed. And many other committees, you know, will impact information that is on the finances and the audits that have not been completed. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Rita. Just for clarity, I want to mention that the records, I don't believe, will be destroyed. I think we're talking about YouTube video retention online. Is that right? Yeah. Oh,
Sorry.
I see. Okay, not responding. Sorry, not allowed to. Christy, your turn.
Yeah, I also agree that the video records should be kept along with the minutes, because when we talk in a town
I mean,
council,
yes, the car is affordable, but it isn't smartly affordable. It would make more sense to go.
Thank you. So I think the records should be kept for video and minutes. minutes only have our name. The videos, the YouTubes have our words. So it's really important, according to the residents, that our words be heard. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else here on the oral communication? Okay, seeing no one, we will proceed to number 3, announcements and presentation.
I have one.
Someone needs to.
Yeah, can everyone online please go on mute until you're asked to speak? There's someone on the phone connection with noise bleeding through. Thank you. And Ken Levine has something to say.
So speaking of video recordings, I watched the video recording of 1 month ago, so it hasn't been deleted yet. Because I was not able to attend the last item on the agenda from last week's meeting, or last month's meeting, which was the reserve policy. So I listened to it and I found that there was a lot of consideration of how we could respond if we fell below the policy. But there was no consideration at all of the one fact that we just learned, and that is how long it takes to determine that we're below the policy. The history is that we went from a $5 million reserve to a $3 million reserve in some number of years before we realized, which was a little over a year ago, that we realized that Tony's coming to the current position. And so I feel that it's irresponsible to have less than that, $3 million, because that's what we spent. That's actually what happened. And so it just seems to me that that's awfully important. Also, most profitable companies, or most companies in general, but certainly profitable ones too, borrow money so that they have flexibility, even though they don't need the money right away. And I think it's appropriate for the town to not borrow money, but to keep a reserve. And lastly, what we did to respond.
Yeah, it's my laptop.
Thank you. The way we responded this year was we cut back on our budget. And I will say that it's a lot, we were somewhat fortunate in that we didn't have to have a reduction in force. We just delayed new hires, which is a whole lot simpler than having a reduction in force and having to get rid of good people. And so I would have, had I been here, made these points and would have voted for a higher number. And I hope that the town council, whether they've taken action or not, will consider what I'm saying. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. We'll move along here now to item 4, approval of the minutes of the last meeting. Last meeting was on April 22nd. We have the minutes here in the pack. Does anyone have any adjustments, or do I hear a motion to approve? Sure. Okay, Ken moves to have them approved.
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we have our minutes. Lightning fast here. Now we're on to new business, item 5, and we'll start with number A, which I will take the input to retitle this the Finance and Audit Update in the future, just to make it clear. But we've covered the audit part, but we can hear from Tony on how we're doing since our last meeting with Finance.
Okay, if someone's talking, we can't hear it. Thanks.
No one's talking yet. That was the issue. And people are smiling here, Rita, because the gain is up really loud on the speakers here in the schoolhouse. So, yeah.
Appreciate it.
Tony is just looking things up. Oh, and we have our main video feed on. That's great. Let me go back on, turn off my phone.
So this is the April finance update. Looking at cash and bank, ended the month of April. We have about a little bit under 23.6 million. We have 2.16, or I'm sorry, we have about 99% invested in interest-bearing accounts of some sort. 2.1, almost 2.17 million is deposited in a money market account at TechCU, currently earning 4.31%. And earnings from investments earned a little bit under 132,000 for the month of April. Even with all the volatility that's going on with the tariffs and everything, we're still drawing some good interest. So year-to-date interest is over 900,000. I had projected 800,000 at the beginning of the fiscal year, so a little surplus there in interest, which is good. As I said, month of April, 132,000, and 776,000 was July through March. Looking at the cash balance by funds, general fund has about 2.3 million, which is an increase. Restricted funds is 20.5 million. And our road maintenance district funds have a little bit under 800,000. And then looking at our fund balance by fund, general fund has 2.2 million. Our restricted funds are at 18.8 million. And our fiduciary funds are at 782,000. So total of 21.8 million, which is an increase from the beginning of the year of 19.6. So all fund balances have increased 2.2 million for the beginning of the fiscal year. General fund balance at 2.2 million, which is an increase of 304,000. So we're running a surplus for this fiscal year. And the general fund reserve is currently at 30% of the budget. And that is my financial report for the month of April. Any questions?
Yeah, we can start as usual with clarifying questions, and we'll hear from the public, and then we can discuss any other issues. One question I have is that unrestricted funds for account 401 capital projects, how is this restricted? Is this restricted by the town? It's not an assigned fund.
It's the use. It's used for capital projects only.
Yeah, but was that a vote of the town council? The other funds I know are coming from other places, and so.
Well, it's a GASB, so it's designated as a restricted fund because it has a specific purpose. But the funding of this particular fund is a transfer in from the general fund.
I see. So in an urgent situation, could that be transferred the other way by the town council, or is that one way?
Well, if they're not committed to current projects,
Okay,
if there's any surplus, then yeah, we can.
just trying to understand.
Yeah, the council can, at their purview, can redesignate funds at any time.
Yeah, but I know that for many of the restricted funds, we can't necessarily do that, right? 'Cause
Correct.
They're earmarked by law for different things. Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. Other questions here from the committee? Questions from the public? Any hands?
Hi, I'm sorry, I'm driving. Somebody else's hand. Just call me when you can.
Okay, Rita, you're up. I don't see hands
Oh.
right now.
Okay, well, I'm just wondering, you know, as far as our contractor numbers for the month of April, say, let's say the month of April, have they increased compared to other months? It's not clear to see, to figure out how much we're spending in contractors and how much we're getting back either from, you know, residents building or from other organizations that owe us money. And so is that number going up or is it going down? Thank you.
Since the beginning of the year, that number's been going down month to month. There have been some months where it's spiked up because of other projects, specifically the Woodside Priory and Stanford project. There was a lot of consultant use. But since for the past couple of months, they've been pretty consistent and lower than anticipated.
And I see a hand up on a telephone number ending in 3056. If you can identify yourself and provide your comment.
Hi, it's Dana Breen. I don't have the paperwork in front of me, but in the restricted funds, could you guys tell me what is in the Frog Pond Fund? Because all the Frog Pond money, there's still 120,000 to collect if and when the Frog Pond is officially designated open space. But some people chose to donate ahead of time. Anyway, we need to mow the pond. And I need to get that done. And so I hope there's enough money in there to get it done.
There is currently almost 29,000 in the fund.
I can get it mowed for 29,000. Okay, good. Thank you.
Thank you, Dana. Any other comments on this financial update?
Ms. Tony, thanks for adding the percent of what the reserve fund is. Good to see that.
Okay, we'll close out comments and open it to any discussion of substantive items. I just want to congratulate you on running a surplus, and the numbers are all looking quite nice now. It of course, I hasten to qualify that optimism with the fact that it doesn't cure the inflation we're seeing in things such as the sheriff's budget and benefits and medical costs and all that sort of thing. But it's good to see, nevertheless. Okay, if there's no other comments here, we can move to the next item, which is the deep dive into town expenses. And this is also over to Tony.
Hey, Tony, did you already present this?
Yes, this is what was presented at the study session and town hall.
Okay.
The town hall, we had one person in attendance and we had about 5 people online, but the total town hall lasted about 36 minutes. There's 3 questions asked.
Okay.
That was it.
Yeah, it's a great day.
So basically an overview. I'm going to go over the town organization, including the departments and funds and the different expense categories. So there are 22 total functions within the town departments. And basically the categories are administration, public safety, planning and building, recreation, public works, non-departmental, which is where our unallocated expenditures are. Then the road maintenance districts, where there are currently 4 of them, and capital projects. There's 4 categories: roads and right-of-way improvements, parks and fields improvements, open space improvements, and facilities and building improvements. For this year's budget, for 25-26 budget, I've taken the town attorney cost out of the non-departmental program and put it into its own category under administration. So that's the one significant change in this year's budget. Looking at the town funds, there are currently 20 active funds broken down into 5 categories. There's the general fund, which is our main operating fund. Then there's the special revenue funds or restricted funds, including capital projects. And then we also have the special districts, which is again, our road maintenance districts. And then our agency fund, which is the customer deposits that we use for our project or applicant projects, which is totally separate from the general fund. So looking at sources and uses, general fund, it's basically taxes and fees, and the use is general operations. Looking at grants, obviously the source of those funds are grants. We can use we have grants that are operating grants. We also have capital project grants. Then the next two funds are the public safety sales tax and the public safety cops grant. The source of these funds are the state sales tax rate, the 7.25%. A portion of that is used to fund public safety, specifically law enforcement, and those funds are restricted for the use for public safety. The open space fund, the source of those funds are the 2% UUT, and then any contributions that are received. And the use of this fund is for open space acquisition and preservation. We have the library fund. We receive funding from the county. And again, those funds are restricted for the library use. Gas tax, we have highway users tax and road maintenance rehabilitation account, or SB1. And again, these projects are used for transportation. Also, right-of-way maintenance is included in this as well. We have the frog pond, and currently the source of that particular fund is contributions, and the use is for preservation of the frog pond remnant. The next three are Measure A, Measure M, and Measure W. These are sales tax measures passed by voters, and funds for these projects for these funds are restricted for transportation projects, road resurfacing, or for example, the rapid flashing beacons projects, the two that were just installed. Measure W funds were being used for this project, as well as a grant that we received from the Transit Authority. Park and Lieu is a developer fee, and the use of these funds is restricted for parks and fields. We have the Inclusion in Lieu Fund. Again, this is another developer fee, and this is for affordable housing. Now, the developer fee and the development impact fee are two separate items. So I don't want to get those confused, because part of the fee study is a nexus study where we're going to be developing development impact fees. So the developer fee is actually something separate than the nexus study for development impact fee. There's separate reporting requirements for developer impact fees. It's AB 1600, where we actually have to do an annual report of how much was collected and what the funds were used for, and whatever is collected, say for example 24-25, has to be spent before 2029. So once we have development impact fees, that's going to be another reporting requirement that we're going to have to do.
Hey, Tony, refresh my memory. How does the Inclusion in Lieu Fund get used?
It's for affordable housing.
But how does that?
Well, we can use it to acquire, if we wanted to acquire land that's going to be developed for affordable housing, or it could be used as a grant to a developer who's going to have an affordable housing project. It could be used, and it also can be used for the housing element. If any portion of the housing element that's related to affordable housing, then the Inclusion in Lieu Fund can be used for that purpose.
Do you know how much we've spent year to date of the Inclusion in Lieu Fund?
I believe we have spent over, in the last 5 years, I believe we spent over 100,000, and that was related to the Willow Commons for a fee waiver.
So then who manages the planned usage of the Inclusion in Lieu
Well, that'd be
Fund?
through the budget process.
And this year, the planned usage is?
Well, we have some housing and safety element updates to do, and so we will be using or we were proposing to use some funds from the Inclusion Fund for that purpose.
What would that be roughly?
About 40 to 50,000.
Now, for the record, it's a $5 million fund.
No, the inclusion, yeah,
Inclusion of.
yeah. But there's also been some other talk about some other items as well.
Okay, thanks.
Just to add to that, we did an analysis, kind of an overview of that fund and potential uses and recommendations maybe 2 years ago.
Yeah,
I
there
can
is a
find it if-
policy for that fund.
And we went through a litany of options of how we could potentially use it and some recommendations.
But there is a policy that's on the website. That policy was adopted by council, I believe, 2 years ago.
Just these funds that we sit on and have no plans to spend just is counter to how you run a business.
Yeah, what I think we should do is let Tony get
And-
through things. We'll hear from the public and then
and-
we'll do all of this. So just save that and then we can want to
and
talk about it because I have some
we-
needs on that too.
And
I get to say a pledge?
technically, we are technically we are not a business. We're a service provider. And I have a lot of rules that deal with how these funds are used. And then the final funds are the road maintenance districts. And those are through the assessment process, the folks that live in these districts receive, it's an add-on charge to their property tax. And in June, we'll be bringing Wayside 2 and Woodside Highlands for the annual assessment. The other ones they're already adopted, or they're already, the county assessor already includes those in their property tax roll. And then the final fund is our customer deposits fund. And again, this is the applicant if they have a project with the town, then they start make a deposit, and then charges are applied towards those deposits and so on. So looking at salary or expenses, basically the categories are salaries, benefits, supplies and services, maintenance, capital improvements, and transfer. So starting with salaries, we have the salary schedule. What you see on this slide is the 24-25 salary schedule, which was adopted in June of 2024. We will be bringing I think the salary schedule was adopted last meeting for 25-26. But this is what we use to build salaries for each position that's authorized in the budget. Looking at salaries, we were looking at building a budget with 18 FTE, but that number is probably going to be about 15. We're currently recruiting for a town manager and a town clerk. I think the town clerk position, I think we have a candidate, and hopefully that position will be filled shortly. And then recruitment for engineering technician 1 is currently on hold, depending on how the budget flushes out. But as you can see, we have filled we have 2 recruiting positions and 1 vacant position. And moving on to benefits, I'm going to be focusing mostly on retirement and medical, because those change annually. Dental and vision, there's very minimal change on those rates from year to year. But there's more significant changes with retirement, especially medical. So looking at our retirement, we have 2 tiers. There are classic employees, and those were employees who were hired before January 1st, 2013. Any employee hired after January 1st, 2013, or who has had a break in service of over 6 months is then classified as a PEPRA employee. And the basic difference is the pension tier. So a classic employee has 2% at 55. So they can retire at the age of 55 and have a retirement that's 2% times the number of years of service. And then the PEPRA ones are at 262. There's a difference in the contribution rate for classic employees. It's capped at 7%. And for PEPRA employees, it's currently capped at 7.75%. Also looking at total contributions from year to year, as you can see in 22, we had almost 176,000 in total contributions. And looking at 24-25, it's going to be 100,000, 101,000. This was as of April. So we're actually, since we have fewer employees, our contributions are less. But doesn't necessarily mean the contribution rate's not going to go up or down. So looking at the employer contribution rates, in 22, the classic employee was 10.34%. For 25, 26, we're looking at 11.94%. That's about 1.6% increase over 5 years. And then Pepper employees, since we have fewer, well, actually now we have more Pepper employees than classic employees. Those contribution rates have only gone up about 0.5% since 21, 22. But as we move further down the line, if we go to a point where we no longer have a classic employee, then that pool becomes inactive. And then what CalPERS does then is lower the discount rate. So in order to keep funding, because there's going to be no new revenue coming into that pool, because we no longer have classic employees, then they're going to lower the discount rate, which means we're still going to have to pay contribution rate that's going to be now captured in the UAL. And the UAL will be in the next slide. So the UAL, the unfunded accrued liability. And this is the difference between the actuarially determined pension liability and the market value of assets held at CalPERS, and it's amortized on a 20-year basis. So in 21, 22, our UAL with both tiers was 92,000. 25, 26, it's going to be 168,000, but it's 168,000 over 20 years. So it's actually, the pension liability is actually greater than what I'm saying here. So moving on to medical, there's two basic plans. There are a multitude of plans, but most employees are either in Anthem or Kaiser. The Anthem rates have increased 12% on average since fiscal year 21, 22. Kaiser rates have increased 9% on average since 21, 22. Now, what I have to do with the budget, the increase is actually going to affect January 1st. So I actually only assume half of the total 12%. So it's a 6% increase for medical benefits in the budget. Also, it's important to understand that technically we really don't have much control over where these rates go. These are managed by CalPERS. They're negotiated by CalPERS. CalPERS is probably one of the largest negotiating blocks because they have over 500,000 employees. So they do tend to get favorable rates. However, since COVID, the rates have just exploded. So looking at services, town services are supported either through a contract provider or consultants or by a staff person. For town administration, the town attorney is through contract. Public safety, we have San Mateo County Sheriff, Woodside Fire Protection District, and also dispatch services also is a contract with the county. And for planning and building, I use Good City as an example of consultant because that's the one we use the most. So looking at the county sheriff, I went back to 2018-19. For that year, it was a little over $1 million was our annual contract. And then for 26-27, we're looking at 2.6 million. And that's projected on a 5% increase from 25-26, which is 2.5 million, which is an annual increase of 128,000 from the previous year. But we also received about $1 million in credit from 23-24 through 25-26. So 25-26 is the last year of our credit from the county, and that's 211,000. So the net increase to fiscal year 25-26 general fund budget was 334,000 for sheriff services, and we're projecting another 363,000 for 26-27. We are beginning to have conversations with sheriff administration, but it's still kind of in limbo in regards to what's going to happen with the sheriff. They have started the process of removing the sheriff, but it's going to be about a 4-month process. She is entitled to due process. She has there's the Peace Officer's Bill of Rights, so she's entitled to exercise those rights, and the county has to make those available to her. So it's going to be about a 4-month process. That's preliminary projections by the county, but who knows?
Tony, I have a question on this. Previously, when we talked about the sheriff's contract, you had estimated 12% increases annually.
That
And
was
now you're,
before,
much smaller. number.
yeah, that was before I received the 24, 25. That was actually a 1 point something percent increase. And then this 25, 26 was a 5% increase. So I'm going back with the trend. I mean, because the previous years, it was a 9% increase. And then we had the big 57% increase in 1 year. So yes, I was projecting 12, but I've since received new data for 2 fiscal years, and it's been about a 5% increase. So I'm building that into the assumption.
Right.
So looking at Woodside Fire, there are 3 items that, or there's 3 services that Woodside Fire provides. One is for vegetation management, and for this example, that's the crew column. And as you can see, after the CZU fire, the vegetation management went from 68,000 to 200,000 in 1 year. We are going to be looking at that as a place of reduction for 25, 26. We're going to have a meeting with the Woodside Fire Protection District because they build their budget based on 80 days of vegetation management. So we're going to come back and say, no, we're going to use fewer days and then build budget savings from that. We're also the CHIPPR program, that's resident initiated. They set up an appointment with Woodside Fire. And then there's the fuel mitigation engineer. Those costs are shared with the town of Woodside as well. But we're going to have a meeting with the fire district staff to kind of go over all these items and just to see where we can find some additional savings there. And then looking at consultants for Good City, as you can see, those numbers have gone up from year to year. 21, 22, 23, 22, 23, 23, 24. A lot of that was related to the housing element. But for 24, 25, it has been primarily due to staffing vacancies. The Good City actually providing town service in relation to also the applicants as well. We're having conversations with Good City. We're trying to restrict their costs just to project applicants because we feel with the town engineer, we now have a new town engineer. And we're going to be recruiting for a planning and building director in the next year that we can put a little bit more controls over Good City. But then there's also still the possibility that if that doesn't work, looking at contracting out the entire process.
So Tony, if Good City's doing housing element work in the past, it doesn't seem to be much of a reduction, and I thought most of that expense was.
Well, yeah, they were also involved, but there was also urban planning partners, and as you can see on this slide, Cotton Shire. I mean, there were other consultants involved in housing elements, but Good City was as well.
So in general, if you add all of those together, are planning costs going down now that the element is behind us?
Well, no, we still have about 100,000 of housing elements costs for the next fiscal year post adoption, and we're starting to see some of that with the rezoning and other areas. But I mean, this is our interim planning and building director. This is something that he is developing. But yeah, there's still going to be some housing element costs for the next fiscal year. But what we're trying to do is to limit what they're doing for the town and getting control for that, because they are doing staff reports, they are doing analysis as well, because we didn't have a planner in place. looking at maintenance is mostly recreation and public works. So for recreation, we have the community hall, parks and fields. Public works, we have the vehicle building and also road maintenance as well. So the capital improvement plan. So to balance the budget last year, or for this current year, the capital improvement plan was basically deferred. We had about 1.3 million identified in CIP projects that we just said, nope, we're deferring all of them. Because about 1.1 million of that was a transfer from the general fund. So we deferred those projects. The only two that went through were the flashing beacons project because there was no general fund funding for that project. And then the resurfacing project was going to start, but we only had interim town engineers. Now that we do have a permanent town engineer, resurfacing will start again. But most of those costs, or nearly all the costs of resurfacing, are going to come out of either gas tax, Measure A, Measure M, Measure W. So we're not going to be impacting the general fund for road resurfacing. That's just for roads and right of way. Parks and field maintenance, we may have a project for the pickleball courts, so repainting the courts. And then there's also another project, bathroom at Ford Field. We have a grant for that, but we have until 2028 to complete that project. That might also maybe because we did adopt a donation policy at the last council meeting, and some of our capital improvement projects may qualify for, if we want to have residents who may want to fundraise, but contribute towards these projects. The Ford Field project could be one that is viable. And there's open space capital improvements, don't have anything identified for 25, 26. And then for facilities and buildings, we're looking at replacing the boiler in town hall. It's been on the list for a few years. We do have a grant that can help fund that. Also, we're looking at IT upgrades, significant IT upgrades, just with the challenges in the schoolhouse, but also at town hall as well. But that's going to be something that we're going to look at for 25, 26. So that concludes my report, and I open it up to conversation.
Thanks. Clarifying questions from the committee first.
I had a question around the amount that we pay to Woodside Fire. So Woodside Fire Protection District has significantly greater taxes. I mean, we the taxpayers, it's a larger jurisdiction, just Portola Valley, but it's about $30 million. It's not a ton of money. I think it's only about $140,000, $150,000. But in terms of the three things that we pay to them, which is vegetation management, the chipper program, and the fuel mitigation engineer, how do we determine what they do, how much we pay for it? And my frankly, a concern would be that we pay for it and then that crowds out what they do. They might have otherwise have done it had we not paid for it twice. I'm just wondering how that process works.
Well, this is my first year with the process. When I came on board last year, it had already been determined. But yes, we're going to be meeting with the district in a couple weeks, and we're going to go over each of these items. Kind of say, hey, we're only going to pay for so many days of vegetation. Now, vegetation management is something that we as a town should be doing, but we don't have the resources in Public Works to do that. So that's a contract with Woodside Fire, because they're doing something that the town should be doing.
Why should the town be doing it if we had
it's our right of way, it's town property. So it's town responsibility. So, yeah.
Hey, Tony, some questions, clarifying question. When you talk about salaries and you talk about total FTE of 18, and then you talk about consultants separately, I'm having a hard time reconciling where are we using consultants? Where you would prefer to, where the town would prefer to have FTEs? Right? And, you know, because it's not clear on that front. Are we using consultants as permanent replacements for FTEs? Or are we using consultants more as variable capacity?
So, yeah, so nearly every function department has a consultant. So for example, in finance, we had Christian Company that were basically augmenting the finance staff to help get caught up for 21, 22. And also parts of 22, 23 and 23, 24. So that was in, you know, there is a staff of 3, excuse me. But for capacity reasons, we had to bring in Christian Company to get caught up. Building and planning has a lot of consultants because we have there's 95 projects currently in the pipeline that are project applicants, and we have 1 planner.
Right, so I guess
And so
as we go into planning for next year, are we looking at converting consultant dollars into FTE dollars?
that is, if we have a full-time employee in that position, then yes, that should reduce the use of consultant, because we now have an employee dedicated to do town.
No, I get that, but I'm
Expense.
just wondering, are we proactively saying we want to convert from consultants to full-time?
We can, but, and I've stated this before, there is no model for the town that there is not a use of consultants. We have to use
Yeah,
consultants.
no, I get that. It's just, I mean, it's
It's
pretty
just,
common that you hire consultants for specialization, but
Right.
sometimes you hire consultants for capacity.
Right.
And you can get kind of caught up in using consultants for capacity when you really need them. You need them to be FTE. You know you need them.
Yeah.
Good,
Yes.
right? And I'm just trying to
And-
figure out.
And we're having that issue currently in planning and building because it's a balance of the consultant actually doing capacity work that helps keep us current, as opposed to having enough employees in place to have some type of redundancy,
Right.
or you know, so that, you know, somebody can actually go on vacation or call in sick, and, you know, and it doesn't all fall apart. So that's where we are right now. And it's going to be, what's going to be the cheaper or the lower cost, I don't want to say cheaper, the lower cost option is going to be having a consultant in place for part-time, just enough hours every week? Or do we go with a salaried benefited employee? And that's, you know, that's where we do the cost ratio or cost analysis, is which one actually fills the need for the service, provides the service, and also provides sufficient backup for the employee.
So will that then be part of the next budget process?
Mhm.
The reason I'm asking is I've seen this trend, at least in the services I've been involved with, not
Mhm.
city, where some teams get kind of intoxicated
Right.
with the use of consultants, and consultants end up being more expensive than FTEs. And, you know, versus where you have a very specialized function that part-time.
Yeah,
So
I
I'm
would
just
say
wondering
the
if we've
last,
Swept through that.
yeah, I would say the last 3 fiscal years, we had that issue where we were intoxicated with consultants.
Yeah. And so do you see an opportunity then, turning this into what I'm hoping is to save money by converting to full-time positions versus consulting?
That is the goal. We want to bring in more full-time employees just to have, like I said, or just to have the redundancy, instead of just having one person in the position being responsible for everything.
Yeah, I have the luxury of really worrying about the financial aspect of this. I would only be interested in that if it saves us money. So,
Right, but we don't want to sacrifice service, and we also don't want to sacrifice employee well-being.
yeah, yeah.
Because right now we have some employees, they're the only person.
Yeah.
And and they're fretting over taking time off because they know if they leave and there's no one else there to do the work, when they come back, it's,
So then what's the plan going into the
so
budget season?
for certain positions, we are looking at if it can be augmented with a consultant on a part-time basis. Or if we can put in a full-time employee. But again, it's, the task is to balance the budget.
Right, yeah. Okay. All right, well, let's look at that more as we do.
Yeah.
Plan. Thanks
No.
for that.
More questions before we open it to the public, and then we'll have a discussion after that.
I guess the only other question I had was around the pension liability, as that's like when I see increasing numbers, they're at least a yellow flag. I mean, do you see that as a concern?
Well, we're in the same boat as every other city that's in contract with PERS. We are fortunate that we do not have public safety, because their liability, if we did, I mean, that liability would be double of our current liability, just from them alone. So in that situation, in that basis, we're in a good place. With more employees in the Pepper plan, over the long term, the costs are going to decrease. However, contribution rates are still going to go up because every year of service is an extra 2%. And then the other component is, how does CalPERS do with their investment returns? So I think it's 6.8% is their investment assumption. So if they take in more than 6.8%, then that also reduces the liability. But then if they have less than 6.8%, that increases liability. But the way they have it formulated is they spread the cost out over 20 years.
So when we see CalPERS go up from 94,000 to 132 to 168, that effectively shows up in next year's budget.
Yes.
As
because that,
as a
so
as an increase of the 1/20th that we pay towards that.
So the 167 you're referring to is the UAL. We actually pay that on top of the contribution rates that we do.
Right.
So, but a portion of the contribution is also deducted from the employee's paycheck as well. But these are just the employer costs. But the UAL is all employer costs.
So while sticking with the UAL, I always thought that CalPERS gave us a report once a year, which was generally a report from a couple of years ago,
Yes,
as to what the unfunded liability is.
is projected to be, yes.
Yeah. So how does that relate to this unfunded accrued liability that you?
The 167 is the number for 25-26 based on the valuation from 2023.
So that's what our unfunded liability was in 2023?
Well, it was measured as of that date. Yeah. That's the measurement date. But it takes CalPERS at least 2 years to do all the calculations. And so they give us a projection of what the UAL is going to be for your current fiscal year.
Oh. So this is a projection from CalPERS, not based on their actual data, but based on what they think it will be
It's
in
based on their actuarial
data.
valuation, which
And
has a
market.
whole set of assumptions, and every single one of those assumptions need to be correct for that number to be right. So, actuaries are the only people I know that get paid to be wrong.
Oh, politicians too, maybe.
Well, yeah. But it's a whole set of generally accepted actuarial standards and it is the standard. Every city uses these CalPERS valuations. And they're also built into the financial statements as well.
But the last time we looked at a CalPERS report, our Portola Valley's unfunded liability was quite small compared to most California cities, as I recall, because we made a large payment a
Right.
few years ago.
Right. But there's been activity since then.
Yeah.
There's been gains and losses and changes in, because part of the assumption is we contribute X amount of dollars every year. And if we have fewer employees based on what they've actuarially assumed, then that also impacts the liability as well.
So I looked at the 2021 audited report, and it said the unfunded pension liability was $712,486. So you're saying that today it's only 146 or whatever the number was.
So was that number from what was due in 1 year, or was that number the total? I mean, I don't have the financial statements in front of me.
That's the number we used in our our assigned unfunded
Oh, in the
our
reserve.
reserve. And
Okay.
it was always to the dollar because as a committee, we said, we know where this number came from. It came from CalPERS, so we'll put down the full number. We never rounded it at all.
Yeah, I think we're getting into discussion here, so we should maybe wait until after a comment from the public, but, and then I can. More questions here before I open it to the public, and then we'll get right back to that. Okay, we're gonna turn it over to the public. I don't see hands in the room. I'll start in order as hands are up on my screen. So Karen Askey, you are on.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello, hello. First of all, thank you to Tony once again for all this great work and sharing all this and helping us increase our transparency with our numbers. It is much appreciated. I have two hopefully quick questions. One is related to the park and lieu funds and what can that be used for? Is it new projects or maintenance? And how much is coming in per year? And given that we have a potential capital improvement fund, do those funds, can they, if you will, almost be intermingled or used for the same things? And then my other question is just if you can clarify in your table regarding staffing, you had the planning and building director listed as filled, but then you said you were recruiting within the next year. And I just wanted to know if it said filled just because it's not an openly recruited position now, or why that was. I wasn't quite following that. Thank you.
Thanks. Is it best to handle these all at the end, or would you prefer?
I might not remember.
Okay, so just go ahead.
So yeah, so the park in lieu fund that can be used for park projects, only park projects. And then the position is the building and planning director position is currently filled by an interim. He was a retired annuitant. So we do technically have a position, a person operating in that position, but we will be recruiting for a permanent building and planning director in the next fiscal year.
Thank you.
Great. Moving along, Dale Fowl, you're next.
Great, thank you very much. I think I asked the similar question last time Tony presented. I was curious, when you went through all the consultants, you did not give us a number for legal, particularly now that it's broken out. What is the budget for legal this year? And then if I get that number, I do have a follow-up to that.
Current year, it's 245,000 is the budget.
Okay, great. And then I do want to put in a plug for Woodside Fire. I think they do a spectacular job, particularly with the services that they provide that are not that are enumerated here. They are extremely responsive, and having been on the emergency prep committee now for well over a decade, they've always been there. They've supported us tremendously and answer all our questions, and have been great for trying to get our fire danger down. Unlike our sheriff's department, who, in spite of this massive contract, doesn't even bother to show up for certain of our committee meetings in town. So thank you all.
Thanks, Dale. Next in order is Rita. Rita.
Hi, thank you.
Hey, Booyah.
Hopefully, Tony, you're
No
able
problem.
to take some time off with your family. You know, you're not one of the people that can't go off without everything falling apart. So please let's do what we can to let you have some time so that you can stay fresh and want to come back to our beautiful town. My question, I've asked this question before.
It's
We?
very simple. We can cancel at any time.
Oh, wait,
Uh,
somebody
okay, it's
got their mic.
Dale.
Dale, you
Dale,
should go
mute
back on
yourself. Dale, mute yourself.
Yes. In
Okay.
other words, if I introduce you to
Oh,
Joe
can
Blow
Dale,
Venture and you cancel me tomorrow and they
can somebody
buy
please mute
you
Dale?
for any
Dale.
time within the next 18 months,
Dale, mute yourself.
right? I mean, that's the only way it should be, because they,
Somebody.
We're working on it, Rita.
yeah.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so Tony, I hope you heard what I said. So please, let us know what we can do to help you. But my question is about auditing the different contracts that we have.
I think
that
it's
have
very interesting.
the contracts that have been out there for the past couple of years
Yeah.
before you came in and when Laura Russell was there, if those contracts can be audited even in a light way, and we can also add a clause because it doesn't look like we have planners in the pipeline except as consultants. But if we can add the clause of converting some to full-time employees over time, even if we have to pay a fee, I think it'll be a way for us to keep some of our brain trusts that we're losing. So here we are hiring and training these people, but then all of that information on the housing element, it's gone out the door along with them and our money. And then right now we don't even have a housing element. So whatever we can do to make that happen, to help us for the future, but let's try and get you some vacation time so that you can stay fresh. Thank you.
Duly noted. But I will say that from June 26th to July 5th, I will be in Scotland. So we have to have a budget adopted before the 25th.
Oh, good. It's a great time to be there.
Yeah, in regards to contracts, I mean, yeah, we are reviewing them. It's going to be difficult having a conversion because consultants don't operate that way, and nor will they allow us to poach their employees. And I don't want to pay a fee because we just can't afford to pay a fee at the moment. And but we also, if we have that conversion, it also means they can poach our employee too. And we just don't want to be in that situation.
Okay, thanks for that comment. Next up, I have a telephone number ending in 7562. If you can identify yourself and provide your comment or question.
Good afternoon, Caroline Brutongen. Can you hear me?
Yes, indeed.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Tony, for this report and for your clarifying answers. It's very helpful. I have about 5 questions. The first one is in regards to the salaries. Those that have recruiting status, are you not counting these salaries into our expenses? Then the second one is regarding the sheriff. You still have about $600,000 for the office building for the sheriff. And there was a lot of conversation around that. And it was my understanding that they were going to pay for it and that the town was looking at alternatives like renting a space in our town hall. This was number 2. The third one was with the donation program. I know that the town adopted a new donation program. It's a nonprofit fund, but we used to have one. The former manager did organize it, and we do have some kind of a donation program. Can you elaborate if that had discontinued or what's happening to that? And you don't know if there's any funds in that? And then I think my last question was, I could not attend the last town council meeting, but in the warrant list, you had about a check for $2,152.50, and that was for police services paid to the Portola Valley School District. It's for dispatch services, and I have not seen this before. in the budget explanation. So I would like to have a clarified question. And I have one more question. Consultant Krupka, is he done, or is this an ongoing consulting contract? These are my questions. Thank you so much.
Okay, can you repeat the first question?
The first one was about the salaries. Those people who are on recruiting status, are you counting these salaries into the salary expense or not for this budget?
Yes.
Okay. Do you want me to repeat the second one?
No, the sheriff's
Okay.
substation, the $600,000 was not being paid by the sheriff's department. That was, we had that in our capital project, that was, that project was eliminated. Let's see, PD Donates was the former town manager's program. That did not get off the ground. There was no formal adoption, and there were no funds collected. Woodside Fire. Can you repeat, please?
That was traffic consultant Krupka.
Oh.
Oh, no.
Oh, no, you were
before
talking
that
about
was-
the
okay.
payment to the school district. Yeah, that was
Yeah.
for
Yeah, I think-
patrol by Woodside Fire. The town split the cost with the school district. And then Krupka is an ongoing consultant, but he was project manager for the Flashing Beacons project, and that project is now finished.
And thank you for that. Let's try to keep the comments rather than a list of questions. I think that would be more helpful. I welcome anyone to email me in between meetings to add things to the agenda or make sure I ask things if that's helpful at all. But we do want to hear from everyone, but I just want to be respectful of everyone's time. David Cardinal, you have your name up or hand up.
Oh, great, thanks. I wanted to start by echoing everything Dale said about the Fire Protection District and maybe build a little bit on what Tony or others have said about their financing. They do bring in property tax from the county close to $30 million. It is, our share of that is basically 10 million since we're 1/3 of the households. So we are getting $10 million baseline services. So we're not really paying for much. In addition, the Station 7, for example, is a $30 million private fundraising effort. Every engine is a fundraising effort. So they're not making money by putting the wet stuff on the hot stuff. So the two things we do pay for, I think Tony mentioned the second one, the right-of-way clearing. That was agreed to years ago because we thought our residents were, I hate to say the word, too lazy or too hard to convince. And so the fire district has been dutifully clearing the right-of-way along roads, including ours. That's not their job. So that's a contract. And the chipper program is also a thing. The truck was donated or granted, and it's a split between Woodside and us, and the chipper goes back and forth, and it's a thing. And both of those are optional things. So they aren't paying for fire services. They're sort of fuel mitigation contracts that we could cut with anyone. So I just wanted to make clear where all that stands and that we're not exactly getting nickeled and dimed. So thank you.
Thanks, David. And Betsy Morgenthaler, you're next.
Yeah, thank you so much. I want to follow up on Chris Ritter's question and larger point about the budgetary consultant intoxication. And a piece of Tony's response that Kirsch and Company is continuing its work to assist the town in getting caught up. That, when I paired the two together and reflecting on Michelle's earlier comment, Michelle Takai's earlier comment that in March of next year, the town wants to appeal to the public at large for a vote to impose higher taxes. But we may need to explain why we've been unable to solve the audit problem in spite of having consultancies availability and expenses. Perhaps there's a good answer, but it's going to be a complex one and a complex conversation. That's not ideal for ballot box measures. So I just wanted to request that when you're looking at the budget this next year, I want you to wonder long and hard about what we can and cannot afford. Thank you.
Thanks, Betsy. Let's see, Christy, I think it's Corliss. Christy C.
Yes, thank you, Tony, for your presentation. It's very thorough and we appreciate it. Few questions or comments. One of your slides said police, and I always think of us having sheriff versus police, although that's an idea to get an evaluation on what the difference of the costs would be. I was on a meeting this week, another comment, and Santa Monica can hire 4 police for $1 million. So I found that interesting. I thought I'd pass that on. And then in a while back, $100,000 was deleted from the Portola Valley budget for fire vegetation management. And we obviously need vegetation management. So I wanted you to be aware that that disappeared off of the previous budgets 1 year to help us with costs. And then I'd love to see possible future projects that we see as a priority. And I'm big on replacing our old license plate readers with Flock license plate readers in case unincorporated San Mateo County takes them off the island at the end of Alpine Road. So we're going to have to look at that someday, and maybe a resident brainstorm on what we feel priorities are, and then any controls on Good City might be something to look at. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any more hands, so what I'll do is open it to discussion here for the committee members. Heard a number of hot button issues here. We were talking earlier about inclusion in lieu and pension liabilities and how all that works, and then those and any other topics you folks have on your minds. Let's talk about them.
Just one comment. I think that this has been talked about. I know it's been talked about at the town council, but in terms of this collective body of the Finance and Audit Committee, as the budget for the upcoming year is being thought about, I would just underscore the importance of getting through the catch-up period for all these audits. I know that it's something that's been front of mind. I'm sensitive to the delays that we're talking about, but with ever more delays, I would just get concerned, particularly as we start to bump up against certain dates, whether it's a election in November 2026 or others. It's just, I think it's an important perspective that the committee perhaps should give to the town council, and then to emphasize with regard to priorities for the upcoming fiscal year.
Yeah, I agree with that. We are making progress on the audits. My understanding is that the later audits will be easier than the earlier audits due to the cumulative nature of the fixes. Fixing the early ones then have a knock-on effect to the later ones. So it's really doing one big load of work, and everything should go more quickly. Is that correct, Tony? That is correct. Talking about inclusionary and lieu funds, that came up earlier. We have the $4.8 million there. And I do believe that the town council members are going to be considering how to make that support our affordable housing commitments that we're making to HCD, and exactly how we'll hold over time. It's not, sounds like a lot of money, but around this town, with real estate prices being what they are, it actually doesn't go very far.
Well, yeah, I guess I just, I believe that when you set aside money, that someone should be responsible for spending it. right? We tend to spend time here talking about saving money. But I think good operations also, when you set a budget, you should spend money because you told your operations managers, here's your budget, go spend to it. So if you're a manager and you're given a budget and you're not spending to it, I think you're not doing your job. Now, I think that inclusionary in lieu, I don't know whose job it is to manage that budget. So that's, something that I think we can improve is if you have the budget, spend the budget, accomplish the goals for the city. Have a long-term plan, have a near-term plan to spend the money that you set aside. And I think we do that on most of the funds quite well. But inclusionary in lieu is in that category. Open space is in that category. I think we should have owners. I don't know, Tony or Craig, do we have owners who are responsible for spending that money or planning and spending? Oh. Craig's approaching the mic.
Just so I can answer your question.
Thank.
So on in lieu, I mean, the council is responsible for it. And, we're continuing to look as we're trying to get our housing element approved, how do we then accomplish the goals of the housing element? So we don't have an exact thing because, unlike a business where we control all the leverage, it's like if somebody wants to come in and build housing, it's not up to us. They're going to come in. And so we've got like churches and stuff, and we're pretty sure they're going to come and ask us for money. But until they do, we don't know what that is. So it's not like we can budget that out and say, well, next year, we're going to spend this amount of money because it's not in our direct control. And open space is, interesting. George, I think, got at it. Property is expensive. And so you do end up accumulating large sums if you're going to buy property. Fogarty is certainly one of the things we're looking at right now, and we're getting an audit on it. And not an audit, but an appraisal on it. So that may be a place that money gets spent. But again, these aren't things that we can just say, oh, let's just move forward next year because we know what the answer is. It's not something that we sort of build ourselves, if that makes sense.
Well, they're not reserves.
Well,
what you just described sounds like a reserve, not like a budget.
Okay, so I'm not sure. We have reserve funds that we use, they're restricted funds, right? So, I'm not sure I understand the distinction you're trying to make between reserve.
Yeah,
and
my
restricted.
understanding is it's not a budget item. I think the open space fund oversees the open space, and they're always looking and alert for opportunities to create more open space. I think the most recent one was the Shady Trail lot a while back. Maybe it's not the most recent one, but that's an example where a property comes on the market that fits into the open space plan and where they believe that they have the opportunity and the resources to act. And so it's very opportunistic in that way, given the slow turnover of property.
Spring Down, the front part of Spring Down is one of those examples. And so until a property owner is willing to sell us some property, you can't spend that money on something.
I think I can clarify it a little bit for you. You have to look into it in relation to general fund spending. And these restricted funds are their specific purposes. Now, for me, I don't care if the balance grows and grows and grows. I only care if I can use some of that money to supplant or to augment the general fund so that I can keep my general fund reserve at a working, workable balance. But they're restricted funds because they're restricted uses. And they're not necessarily general fund purposes. They can be at their own purpose outside of the general fund.
Yeah, I get that. I just think that we're a city with voters who have decided to put money to work. And when money isn't put to work, it's kind of just curious, right?
And you should separate out the fund. So in lieu is something.
Yeah, in lieu. I was talking in lieu.
Right, so in lieu is something that builders pay.
Yeah.
Typically when they do subdivisions.
Right.
So it's not technically the residents are putting
Okay,
that
but we
money in. So-
have that money.
Right, exactly, we have that money.
And it's effectively a tax we put on builders to
Right.
build here.
Right, and
So if you want to do business in Portola Valley, you build and you give the money to the city.
Exactly.
And I would think as a resident, you would expect that money to be put to work or something.
And so we basically passed a policy for how we can issue that money. And then we have roughly 100 units that we have to build in the next, say, 6 years. And for the very low and this is 100 like very low income, those units are going to need some kind of additional help undoubtedly. So
Well, they're units that developers need to build. Cities don't build.
that's right,
housing.
but that typically developers who build very low income housing units do it with help of the jurisdiction. They don't just say, oh yeah, we're going to just come in and do this. So if we want to meet our housing element goals, it's likely we're going to have to help them with that goal.
Okay. And so
That's what that money is targeted for. So,
and so who manages that?
well, yeah, the town council ultimately.
Town
manages
council.
it. Yeah, I mean, it's a town council decision. This policy is a town council policy. So the council decides what programs we're going to spend that money on.
So there's no town staff works.
I mean, not directly. I mean, planning certainly involved, like if, I mean, typically if somebody was going to come and say, I'd like to build low-income housing units in the town, and in order to do that, I need you guys to help me with this amount, that's going to come indirectly through the planning department, but eventually that decision is made by the council.
Okay.
Does that help?
It does.
I mean, I know it's complicated, and I agree. I'm frustrated.
No,
too with
I
the
don't think
size
it's
of the-
complicated. I think
It's different than a business.
I think,
development.
no, look, I think it's effective. That's my personal opinion.
Okay,
So,
there you go.
you
Well,
know, that's it.
yeah.
So.
It-
That's it.
It's also the same with our transportation funds to Measure A, Measure M, Measure W, gas tax. But the problem, those balances built up so much is that everything shut down for 2.5, 3 years with COVID. But we were still receiving the funds,
Now you're, but now you're
but now we're going to spend it.
operationally, you're spending.
Yeah, I think the main thing is that the inclusionary in lieu and the open space fund to different degrees have to be reactive and opportunistic to a certain extent. We did, I'll try to get you this, we did make recommendations a couple of years ago on how the town council might think about deploying our funds for maximum impact because well, $5 million is, again, a lot of money. In terms of getting a project done, it's not enough to get a substantial number of units built all by itself. So how could that be used creatively to augment the developer's pre-existing project? But then you have to have the pre-existing project come up.
And,
Yeah, you need a
and the other thing
developer
about,
who's interested
Yeah.
before you do it.
right, but the other thing is that, like, we have not assessed a fee in years. Like we haven't received a developer fee in that fund in years. It's
Yeah.
basically been interest that's
Yeah,
been,
yeah, I think the last big development was in Blue Oaks or something
Yeah.
like that.
No, no.
Okay, well, somebody probably knows differently, but we don't get that many.
right. It's the same with park. I mean, I have not seen any in the last 2 to 3 years where we've received a fee. It's all been interest building in these accounts or funds, I should say.
Can we talk about the meaning of the pension liability number? That had come up before. Ken, I think you had some questions about it. I'm thinking that it may be the difference between the amortized number versus the total aggregated number. But I don't know if that's correct. I think what we're looking at is an amortized number where it's as if paid over 20 years, what the present value is, sort of thing. Whereas before, I think we were looking at a lump sum aggregate thing. And yeah, and it is frustrating, of course, these estimates, but it's a bit like economic figures out of the Department of Labor or something where they have a preliminary and then they revise and so on and so forth as you know what's going on. Oh, cool.
is a very raw spreadsheet. Okay, so as I said, there's the classic plan, which is also considered the miscellaneous. Or I'm sorry, we are miscellaneous employees. There's public safety and miscellaneous. They're the two categories that CalPERS uses. So for classic individuals for fiscal year 2023, the unfunded accrued liability was 1.9 million. The accrued liability was 9.9 million. We need this, just to show. So here, so you had 9.9 million was the accrued liability. The market value of assets was a little bit over 8 million. So the unfunded liability was 1.9. So we have a funded status of 80%. And then looking at the Pepper employees, which are down here. So the accrued liability was 641,000. Market value is 555, and your unfunded accrued liability is $86,000. So that's 86.6%. And so this was the last valuation that we received in 2024, but it was measured at 2023. We should be receiving another valuation soon, but that's going to give us the contribution rate for 26, 27.
So Tony, if we wanted to, but as we did, I don't know how many years ago when we paid almost, it was over 900,000. Could you move up? We would have to, in theory, make a deposit of 1.9 million. Is that right?
Yeah, I think it was 2021 when we put that money in. That's why the assets went up.
Yeah, so about 2 million.
It was longer than that. It was under the Nick.
Maybe
No, it
2020
was
when-
it was way pre, it was under the Nick.
Well, I'm just trying to figure out the big jump in
Oh, it
assets.
could have been maybe a gain in the market or something. No, so anyway, back.
Okay.
So if we wanted to do what we did X years ago, George and I can agree, we would have to fund 1.9 million. Is that right?
That would be to reduce it for that year. But if we were to say, if we were to go to CalPERS and say we want to make an additional contribution, there are tables in the valuation report, like if we want to fund, instead of funding 20 years amortization, we want to use a 10-year amortization or a 5-year amortization, then obviously that would increase the payment that we want to make. But if we wanted to bring it to zero, then yeah, CalPERS actuary would then have to give us a new number. Because then they would want to say, because then it would be called a fresh start. But they would want to give us a new number what the liability actually is. Because this is the liability as of 2023. If we wanted to do it as of today, they would have to update the number.
Yeah, no, I understand that, but conceptually, that's the number.
Yeah.
Based on the data back. And I think 23 was not a good investment year, right? It was better in 24 and 24 too. So
Yeah, 24, they did exceed the 6.8.
23 was when the interest rates rose, right? So the market
Yeah.
dropped.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, well, that's a lot from zero that we had X years ago. I mean, I'm actually a little shocked. It's so big.
Yeah, so in 2021, it looks like that's when the big payment was made.
No,
Well,
No,
it was measured in 2021 for the actuarial study. Because your unfunded liability went from 1.3 million in 2020 to 400,000 in 2021.
Which is the 900,000 we paid. So that's when they credited it to us.
And then you had a negative liability in Pepper.
Yeah, I got it. And that was at that time where we hard to remember those halcyon days when our reserves were too high. We had too much cash. And think it was Bill, who's not with us today, Bill Urban, who was advocating strongly for good use of that money during a guaranteed return would be to pay down our pension liability. We did. And it's a good thing. Otherwise it would be higher now.
Now, if we want to get out of we would have to pay about 3.5 million as of 2023. But that process is we notify PERS we want to terminate, and then they will calculate a new liability using a lowered discount rate, which makes the payment go up higher. So they kind of don't want you to terminate. So they kind of make it difficult. Yes.
No, and it makes sense to amortize this over a 20-year schedule where you're making payments, which they're then investing, and that then works the miracle of compound interest on that end of it, is why that number is more manageable. So.
And then if you look at the demographics, we've had 11 classic members. We have 7 as of 2023. As of today, that number's 3. Active Pepper members, we went from 4 to 8. And that number is now actually probably 12 or 11. And since I had a 2-year separation in my service, I'm now a Pepper employee.
More discussion on this item before we move to the budget.
I was taken by Mark's comment, and I think Michelle echoed it, that not having audited statements could be detrimental to the electorate passing any new taxes. And so I'd like to consider whether the committee should have a resolution asking the town council to put more attention on that particular issue, so that it's highlighted for them.
It's not on the agenda for tonight, but it could be something that could be discussed at a future meeting.
Yeah, we can do that at a future meeting, but I think the audit's part of the overall budget things, and we do agree that we need to get these audits done. Anything else on this item before we move to budget discussion, long-term solutions? And as part of the revenue sources, obviously getting our audits done is important, so we can keep the discussion going if you like. Move to budget update.
So we have a comparison of the 24-25 budget to where we are right now with the 25-26 budget. We're projecting a 6% increase in revenues, bringing it to 7.9 million. The biggest increase is going to be UUT. As I've recorded in the past, that we did identify UUT providers who were not assessing the correct rate. We're making that correction. Also, the projections for 24-25 were based on incomplete data from the previous years. So this year we have complete 24-25, we have complete data. So the UUT is actually going to come in higher, significantly higher than the previous year. We are factoring some increases in relation to the fee study in regards to licenses and permits and charges for services. Also with investment earnings, projecting a slighter increase in that as well. So for revenue total of 7.9 million, this is just general fund only. And then on the expense side, right now it's 8.12 million. So it's 199,000 or $200,000 hole in the budget right now that we need to find.
Hey, Tony, I missed it. Why do you forecast UUT going up by 24%?
Because right now we're over $1 million in this year alone.
Based on,
Yeah, this year
actual.
alone. Yeah, based on actual. Yeah,
Okay.
the 24, 25 number was based on incomplete
Yeah,
data.
okay, thank you.
And the sales tax going down? Is that again bad
Yeah,
data?
that's HDL, their projections. Their, our largest sales tax producer, which is Rosati's, they had a loss.
They had a lot. What do you mean by a loss?
I can't really go into details because it's confidential information. All I'm just saying is that they're our largest provider. According to HDL, what they've reported as sales tax is less than the previous year. So and that has having an impact on our sales
Well,
tax
they
revenue.
closed, was it this fiscal year for what month? Six,
they were
six,
closed?
8. Well, they did. Right, but that's this fiscal year. 24, 25. So that would make sense that it was down.
Right, but it's down from what we projected for 24, 25. And so I've adjusted to what they've projected for 25, 26.
Again, other than
Again,
driving
it's-
by Rosati's a couple times a way, that doesn't make sense to me. Maybe there's more power outages like yesterday
this-
or Sunday.
These numbers are coming from the California Department of Tax and Fee Administration, so it's what they're reporting.
Yeah, but they don't know that they were closed for 6 weeks or what. I mean, it was quite a long period of time.
Right, but it's what Rosati's is remitting and reporting to, and that's just one example. I mean, there's other businesses as well. We do not have a lot of businesses in the town, but the largest one, the largest sales tax driver is Rosati's, and if they have significant loss, and that impacts our total revenue. So I've adjusted downward based on current year activity. Okay.
Yeah, absent power outages like Sunday evening when they had to close.
I'm-
And I don't know their remodeling plans. Obviously, that could impact.
I'm using a firm that
Okay,
has access to the sales tax records for the town.
No, we
Yeah.
got it. Upside surprise would be nice. I think, but you gotta go
Yeah,
with the best
they're
numbers.
just using data and not driving by there every day.
Again, it's what shows up, it's what Rosati sends to them.
Okay, we'll
It's
get
not
into
yet.
debate after we hear from the public, more clarifying questions.
Yeah, I'm just focused on the two largest increases in expenses. The first being over 200,000 increase in benefits. I presume that is pretty much just a result of both of the primarily health insurance increases. Is that's what that is, right?
Well, it's the total increases in medical, retirement, and also, filling vacant positions as well.
Okay, so that's the 200. Then in terms of the services increase of 300,000. So between those two, those are increases of 500,000 where the overage of expenses to revenues is 200,000. So I'm just focused on those two expense items. Talked about benefits and then the increase of 300,000 in services.
That's the sheriff's contract.
That's the sheriff. Okay, that's
Any more questions up here before I ask for comments? Okay, comments in the room or online? I've got Rita Combs. Rita, go ahead. Hello, Rita? Yeah. We can't hear you, but your hand is up. Is there anyone else we can go to while Rita sorts out whatever's going on? Okay. Rita, we can't hear you, so it may be a factor of you driving or
How about now?
now is fine. Yes, please.
Okay. Okay. My question is, with the audits and finances not done, how much money, if it was all done, would we be able to get from the state or any outstanding whatever? And I understand that we probably can't take any loans or put in for any grants without that information, and it's really holding us back. But if we were able to catch up right now, how much money? I think last time it was about 246,000, but maybe that number has changed. Thank you.
Thank you. And I don't see any other hands, so we can go to discussion here for all of us.
Can I respond to that?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, so the money she's referring to is gas tax, and we've already collected that. That's the only thing that's being withheld, or that was the only thing that's being withheld by the state.
Yeah, and is our current audit status impairing us from any grant availability or anything like that?
We had received grants for this current year for the flashing beacons.
Yeah, so the answer would be no,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm being very careful here. From a nonprofit perspective, yes, having audited financial statements included in your grant application, absolutely a must. From our perspective, the grants that we apply for are mostly transportation. It's funding they have to spend. And so we get minimum allocations but if we wanted to go outside of our normal grant process, yeah, that might be a hindrance. It doesn't mean we're not going to get the grant. It just means our ranking might be lower because we don't have, when they rank the application, they might just say, oh, they don't have audited financial statements. So they're just going to go lower in the deck.
Did we not pursue any grants because we knew we didn't have audited financials?
No, that we pursue grants when our resources allow us to. And primarily it's for transportation. We did go through state parks for the Ford Field bathroom. That one's outside of, but most of the grants that we do receive are either from the Transit Authority, MTC, or federal through those state agencies.
I'm just going to try to stick to what I think is the only thing that really matters here, because revenues, short of new taxes, they're largely fixed. Expenses are more within our controls, and the only two that really matter are, again, the 200,000 increase in the benefits and the 300,000 the sheriff. Is the 200,000 increase in the benefit expense, is that associated with 18 FTEs or 15 FTEs?
That's 15.
That's 15 FTEs, got it. And then with regard to the sheriff contract, the increase of 315,000, I realize that there's other funds of which is paid. This is just the general fund. My recollection, it's something on the order of 1.5 million, but increasing. So this is increasing from about 1.5 million out of 2.5. The 100 million is this from other funds. Is that going from 1.5 to 1.8 approximately?
It's going from 1.8 to 2.2.
Oh, okay, 1.8 to 2 point, got it. And is that already based upon the pre-negotiated credit and discussions had previously with the sheriff?
Yes, if we did not have the credit this year, we would be paying an additional $200,000 out of the general fund.
What is your perspective, Tony, on degrees of freedom, if any, on reducing that 2.2 out of the general fund for this upcoming fiscal year?
The only other two funds I have are the sales tax, and we only get about 16,000 a year in that. And then there's the COPS grant, which we get about 150. So
Maybe
those
I'm-
are, the- so
yeah.
those are the only other two funding sources I can use.
And again, I don't know who negotiated and with whom it was negotiated, the sheriff, but presumably the sheriff that's on her way out now probably had some impact. I'm wondering if with whatever replacement the supervisors of the county decide who's going to replace the sheriff, I'm just wondering if that's an opportunity to have another discussion to reduce this 2.2.
Well, we're gonna have discussions with the current staff. Cause I mean, she could survive it. And, so we've been deliberately neutral, in the process. And so, but like even the folks that are there now, they have no authority. They can't say yes or no, or, she can, but if it's getting her, but like I said, we're gonna have conversations with her staff.
Yeah, my own recommendation is, we have to be alert to reality on the ground, and, we're dealing with the current sheriff, and the current sheriff may be the future sheriff. There's a lot of drama playing in the background. If things change, then that is upside opportunity, for us potentially. But, there's no point spending a lot of time. Hope is not a strategy, as they say, in business. So,
But any alterations that we can make to it's gonna be service level.
okay. Well, I mean, but they did change how they calculated overhead. From the 60-year precedent to, a complete dramatic change a few years ago.
Right.
So if we could go back to the old way of calculating overhead, that would fix everything.
In terms of overhead, I'm really worried. She's suing us, the county, and other, I think two sides are suing the county, and I'm really worried that,
Okay, so here's your scorecard. She is suing the county.
and then
Her undersheriff and one of the captains is suing her. And then her former chief of staff is suing the county.
so that's two against us.
Yeah.
Which somehow could eat into this overhead.
Yeah, anyway, I don't know that, gaming the sheriff's outcome is a worthwhile discussion for us.
Yeah,
It's simply enough to know that she may be loose in the socket. If she is, there may be the opportunity to change whatever we come up with, but we can't, assume that. We have to assume that this is a process and she may be here for however many years.
And just one other comment. I swear at one time that COPS funding used to cover some of the sheriff's contract, and it may have been when we went to the 0.5. I can't remember that far back.
We're using it every year.
Oh,
yeah,
okay. I thought
yeah.
you said it had to be for,
Public safety purposes.
or,
and the
but not,
contract, yeah.
but not the day-to-day contract. I thought there was, you said it couldn't be used, it had to be used for unusual or on top
Right,
of.
but we only have 150,000 per year to spend.
Right, but
And
still,
then the public safety sales tax is like 15, 16,000. So that's.
well, believe it or not, one time the COPS funding covered our contract.
Right, when it was $1 million a year.
Okay, I think we ready to move on to the discussion of the longer term solutions.
This is last question with regard to this upcoming fiscal year has the town council made a priority operating on a balanced budget, or is there an openness to operating under a $200,000 deficit?
Well, that's all going to be part of the conversation.
Okay, let's move on to item D, budget discussion, long-term solutions, including revenue sources. One thing I wanted to potentially start out with was a report out on something that our interim town manager, Mark Linder, asked us to consider at the last meeting, which was this notion of structural opportunities to potentially annex adjacent unincorporated properties, a variety of other structural things that I won't go through the entire list here. I will just set the table and then ask Mark Wacer to give us sort of an update on recent meeting that we had. we being a subcommittee here, which was Mark, Chris Rittler, and myself, looking into these items, thanks to Mark, set up a meeting with Rob Bertoli, who is the executive director of LAFCO for San Mateo County. LAFCO is an acronym that I believe stands for Local Agency Formation Commission. And this is a fabulous entity established in every county in California by a state law in 1963. And these folks are tasked with understanding all the ins and outs of all these kinds of questions around who annexes whom, how do you combine communities, how do you incorporate communities or disincorporate them or form special purpose districts and so on and so forth. And so we have some preliminary stuff with that. We got to meet with Rob for a couple of hours yesterday. And Mark, do you want to give a quick synopsis?
Sure, be happy to. And actually, I first start with actually an expression of appreciation really to the town council, but really to Mark Linder. In the year and a half that I've been on this committee, it's really it's an example of very clear direction or request of this committee. I mean, we're fundamentally here. We are in a service capacity. We are here to serve. We're here to provide perspective. We're not here to vote or set policy. And having that kind of clear request was very helpful. The items or the ideas that we were asked to consider, all of which actually are structural in nature, as George mentioned, and all of which would require this entity of which I was not particularly familiar with before. And we did just meet, the subcommittee did meet yesterday with Rob, who is the director, at least of San Mateo County. And he was a really good perspective, a point of perspective on a lot of these things. Almost all of which I would say would have some impact on the upcoming general election in November of 2026. Even though technically under some annexations and consolidations with Woodside and so forth, they might not necessarily need to be voted upon, but they are subject to protest. So I think the operating assumption is that anything would be required to have a vote of whatever the jurisdiction that is impacted. If it's purely within the existing jurisdictions of Portola Valley, it would just be purely a vote among that jurisdiction. If it's another extension by annex, for example, Ladera, either the commercial district of Ladera or the residents, it would require first a level of either protest, if you will, or objection, and then that would trigger a election of the impacted party. So that's what we learned. There is more to come. One other thing that we learned is that this organization, LAFCO, at least San Mateo County, they regularly go around and actually to proactively look at reviews of various jurisdictions. And it turns out that it's been about 15 years since LAFCO, San Mateo County, did a review of Portola Valley. They're currently just about to embark on one for Woodside, and they're subsequent, they're going to be looking at one for a review here in the next few months. That would be in draft form sometime in the summertime, and then in final form that would be in coordination with both town staff as well as presented to town council probably in early fall. So that's what we learned. So the timing of this outreach was quite good, and we expect to learn more and work with LAFCO to learn more to actually then deliberate it among this committee so that we can provide some perspective to staff and
Yeah, thank you. And I will only add to that it's complicated. A lot of what Rob was taking us through were all these various items of putting together cities in the form of a merger. You know, we talked about, well, Woodside and Portola Valley potentially want to get together. Would that be useful financially? Ladera is another example. The commercial district, the unincorporated district. Apparently, we're also contiguous with Upper Los Trancos. Vista Verde is outside of town, and so that's possible. Rob is going to be conducting this municipal services review, I believe it is, for both Woodside, Portola Valley, where they'll look at this and other issues. One of the key considerations, obviously, is that from our perspective as a finance committee, we're thinking about efficiencies as a town, additional revenue, One reason why a better negotiation posture with the sheriff would be helpful is in most of these cases, this doesn't result in any actual new money for the county. It's just an accounting exercise where we're shifting where funds are counted. So instead of funds going from, say, Ladera, the commercial district there, to the county and then to the sheriff, it would then go to the county, someone come back to Portola Valley and go back to the sheriff again. From the perspective of the entities that would become part of Portola Valley in that instance, you have to consider what's in it for them, right? Why would I want to sign up for that? Because from a Portola Valley perspective, having more revenue to bail out PV might sound good, but if you're already doing quite well in Ladera or in Woodside for that matter, well, what's in it for me in the form of additional services or attractions? And so we discussed all of that. We even discussed the idea of disincorporating the town. You know, if we're having all these housing mandates because we are a town, and if we're getting extra charges from the sheriff because we are a town, well, what if we weren't a town anymore? And what if we were a special district the way Ladera is, where Ladera manages the recreational facilities, we can manage our open space and do our building and planning at the county level. And of course, that also has lots of problems. The state has tried very hard to make that a move of last resort for towns for a variety of reasons, very controversial, and it would potentially have other effects on us in the sense of losing representation and what level of control we do have over our own destiny, because then, of course, the San Mateo County Board of Supervisors would be in charge of all of the various issues that we currently complain about. And we may have a good deal less success at that level than we would have here. So all of this is very preliminary. The reason there's nothing written in your packet is the recency of our substantive meeting with Rob. Rob has offered to come back and present to this committee over the summer when he's proceeding with his municipal services review. And we're going to engage with him further. I know, for example, he's going to help us get more visibility into what the property tax numbers are for these different options. And, you know, we'll go through it and we'll evaluate it and figure out the pros and cons and whether there is a positive case, obviously, for the opposite party in any of this kind of thing, even from a thought experiment standpoint. But that's sort of the interim progress report at the moment.
George, I'd add one thing. It's a lengthy process. So measured in years,
Yeah, he
not,
mentioned it
not
would-
in months.
Yeah, he mentioned it, the 2026 objective would not be quickened. Right. Rather, wouldn't be enough time.
So what he's saying is we may still need revenue source and we can be pursuing other.
Well, this is, Chris brought up a wonderful thing, and I'm so glad you did, Chris, because that was the big take home for me, was that 2026 is too soon. So if we have in our mind that given inflation and everything, we need some structural solution, and let's assume the current sheriff administration and accounting procedures stay intact, which is the conservative assumption, and we need to think of something else before these items, which doesn't mean we shouldn't consider these items, because if something makes sense long term, we should think about it, but we need something.
And how about the other, the fourth item on Mark's list of some people putting up $1 million or 5 million, whatever it was, dollars, 25 million, and that we would get the first 4%, maybe everything.
Yeah, I don't know. My own sense is that kind of thing has to be anchored by a major donor with the idea. It's sort of my personal thing, sort of approach. Otherwise, we could set up a fund, and unless you have an anchor tenant saying, "Yeah, I'm in. This is a big number," be done with that.
Well, it seems to me that they asked for advice, and it seems to me that the answer is pretty obvious. That's a wonderful idea, and that if the person you're talking to about that is interested in being an anchor investor, that would be great. I actually read about this. Some other organizations have done that.
Yeah, I'm all in favor, but it's, for me personally, that heads back into hope as a strategy sort of thing, having somebody with lots of money come in and do something nice for me. Yeah, I think again, it's a bit like, uses for the open space fund. It depends upon having a, public spirited, seller of land who wants, to work with the open space committee on open space. Similarly, we need to have somebody who would be, interested in that sort of thing.
Right, well, I don't think it's a wild idea. But,
No, not at all.
I mean,
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, so
Excellent.
I think it's great. I'm just, again, I'm not going to count on it any more than a change in the sheriff's accounting approach.
So my understanding of what was talked about and moved forward at the last town council meeting was this donor program. My understanding, at least having watched the proceedings on YouTube, was that that was fundamentally focused more around capital projects as opposed to operating funds. If that's incorrect, yeah, just let me know.
Yeah, that's the initial purpose. But in my conversations with John, like, at some point, this could happen. And so he's like, okay, but his initial idea, the kernel for this was, just to help the town fund capital projects so it can take some pressure off the general fund.
Any more questions from here before I open this item for comment?
I don't know if it's the appropriate time, but what about other revenue opportunity pursuits? We haven't had any discussions on that.
Yeah, why don't we ask for comment and then we'll go to that
Okay.
discussion. All right. Yeah. Any comment on the readout from the subcommittee from the public? Okay, I don't see any hands. Oh, I do. Greg Keller.
It's not exactly direct feedback on the readout, but following up on Chris, I mean, I'd love to hear sort of the timeline as you guys sort of look at the pros and cons. So when that's going to happen. And the other question I'd ask you, and I don't know if it's Mark, I'm losing track of who asked it, but the question of the balanced budget, is it going to be exactly balanced or is it balanced within 200K? And I think the council would very much appreciate to hear the finance committee's opinions on that.
Pardon me for interrupting, but your microphone is off.
That was a miss on my part.
David Cardinal.
Oh,
Oh.
okay. David.
Sure.
David.
Thanks. I mostly want to say thanks for taking this on, the subcommittee. I've thought personally for a long time about annexing Ladera and maybe Webb Ranch, not that anyone would let me do it. And so it's tricky, but I'm glad you're looking at it. And LAFCO is definitely an underrated organization that we haven't paid much attention to for a long time. And they're pretty powerful, as you're discovering. So I think it's great to engage with them, and it's great that they have an interest in us. So thanks.
That's great. Thank you for your comment, David. And I'm sorry that my mic was off a moment ago. I was starting the discussion that in past meetings, we've discovered, or rather discussed, revenue increasing measures, and various proposals have come about, such as tinkering with the composition of the UUT, going to a parcel tax, and also the idea of having a simple charter for the town that would enable Portola Valley to charge a differential document transfer tax. That is upon the sale of property, a fee that would be paid in addition to the one charged more generally by San Mateo County. And I think that latter option was where, and here we can all discuss, the sense of the committee seemed to be the most appropriate, given the the legal hurdles of getting things passed, such as counting as a simple majority vote in favor rather than a supermajority requirement in a vote of the town, and lending itself to minimal impact on ongoing residents in the town, and tying it to people who typically are realizing hopefully a profit on the sale of their property as they exit the town. Now, all taxes are something to be avoided in my view, certainly if they're unnecessary, but this puts the tax burden where it's best able to be managed potentially, and it can be adjusted by the town council based on facts on the ground. So if things changed at the sheriff's department, or we had other changes to our revenue cost structure or relative inflation rates, and we had adequate reserves and didn't really need the document tax, well, you could reduce it to a de minimis number or zero, I'm sure, under this kind of charter provision. So
That's a UUT we could reduce, not the,
I was talking about the document transfer tax.
well, that,
You could
well, I
change it.
suppose you could write it in that way. I
Well, I'm only saying that I don't think we would set the number in the charter. I think it would be that the town council is empowered to enact the document transfer tax, and the town council would set that rate. And make it change.
okay, I always thought the voters would vote for the tax. And what we could adjust is the UUT, because we know historically we've done that.
Well, that would be another.
We know we can do the UUT because we've done it.
UUT is adjusted by vote.
Right, but we could, in November of 26, we could say, give the council the power as we did it.
Yeah, the last time the council was given the authority to extend the 1% reduction for another 4 years, but then it expired.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So we know we can reduce
Yeah.
it, the UUT, because well, by vote, because we've done it. but-
Well, the charter could say whatever comes about. If we have to buy off on whether this is an appropriate way to go. That is charter town with a document transfer tax, and then the next level of decision is whether the town council should be limited in what that document transfer tax should be. Should it be set at a number, a range, a maximum? And that's a further consideration. Below, once you decide that charter and a document transfer tax is a way to fill this sort of gap we have, where we need to make some change in the next couple of years, before any of these longer term structural things could come into play.
Well, just since Ken and I were the little subcommittee, none of the other, I don't think we ever saw in any other jurisdiction where the real property transfer tax was adjusted. It was a fixed amount.
Yeah, but is it fixed by law or in the charter?
I think it's,
By vote.
well, yeah.
And RPTT, real property transfer tax, must be voted on
Oh, okay.
after it's been approved by the town council.
Oh, okay. That's
So
very
whether
helpful.
it's up or down, it has to be voted on
Okay.
and passed.
Okay, well then, we would have to make sure that whatever proposition the town council came up with had enough flexibility for them, but also would avoid the unintended consequence of accumulating too much in the way of revenue.
Yeah, and that's why simultaneously, my idea would be to have the UUT up, because we know, we know historically we've done that. So I remember one time it says, you have to vote to reduce your tax, but you have to vote. I still
Okay.
remember that.
Thank you for that clarification, because actually
That's
that was
really
a bit of a
helpful for me.
confusion on my side too, because actually as I understand it, and this was actually, I'm looking at a chart that was put together by the town attorney, and this just shows what needs to happen when time of the election and the threshold for the vote. As I understand, to vote a charter city, that is a simple majority, and I had understood it to be, as you just described, it's two separate votes. One on whether there's a charter city, the other one is to whether there is a real estate transfer tax. As I had understood, revenue, new taxes that are imposed upon taxpayers tend to be super majorities, not simple majorities. I understand that charter city is super majority. Do you know whether the real estate transfer tax is that simple majority or is that super majority?
It's a general tax, so it'll be simple majority.
Okay.
The charter city is a simple majority. No, they vote simple majority. Yeah. Yeah, the vote. Yeah, the vote for, there's two separate votes, and the classic example was St. Helena. Yeah, two separate votes, one to become a charter city and two for the real property transfer tax fixed amount for indefinite period of time. And I,
And do they have to be at separate elections?
no, it was the
No,
same,
same
and I hate to
election.
say it, in St. Helena, that they voted against it.
Yes. They're both
Yeah.
simple okay.
And
got it,
at the
thank you.
same time, yeah.
If anyone refers to this chart that was put together by the city attorney, it shows simple majority, but it refers to two things. It wasn't clear in my mind whether it was just charter city or real estate matter of fact, but it's actually, it relates to both. Thank you.
Yeah, but am I correct in suggesting that we thought that that course of action was the best thing to really pursue
Yes, and I believe the town council did as well.
in the short run? At least?
That is not true of this particular member, I would say. I
Great,
it's actually for-
that's what I'm
for-
looking for.
Yeah, not for this member, in large part because practicality. I think that there's a high chance that it'll be voted down, just as it was in St. Helena, for a number of reasons. Number one is that this is something that is taxed when you sell your property in town. That means that we, the voters, vote on it. It means that whenever we leave the town, we actually get less to go to wherever we go to leave the town. We get less. The incentive for the person who leaves the town is to get as much as possible, not more, not less. So that's actually one. Two is the town is the example of St. Helena. It was essentially the town council there put all their eggs in one basket. It didn't pan out for them. They had to have a significant reduction in force in the town staff thereafter. Just that three is this town specifically with previous votes for taxes, specifically the UT, where the history has been generally to vote down rates, not up rates. So for those reasons, I think that it's a decent chance that it would be voted down, in addition to the fact that we're already the single highest tax county in the United States. And this is a new tax. We may call it revenue enhancement, but it is a new tax. So I think that would be a tough thing to put in. I think it would be a tough thing for at least this particular member of this committee to recommend to the town council to move forward on this basis.
Yeah, great.
Just to be clear, the council's request is not for you guys to give us what you think is the best. It's to give us the pros and cons on all the options. So that's what we're looking for. We're not looking for you to vote one of them above the rest. The other thing I would ask is, have you looked at the parcel tax if it's a citizens initiative? Because that takes a simple majority. So again, if it's a parcel tax and it's by the council, it takes a super majority. So that would be the two different versions of the property tax that we'd ask you to opine on. And then the last thing I would say is UT. I mean, we voted for the UT initially. I mean, that was a positive vote and that was a super majority. It's just the council had decided this is kind of to Chris's point, we were getting more money than we needed. And so at that point we said we should lower it. So we made an explicit choice to lower it. The odd thing is we still need a vote to lower it. The council can't just say, well, we want to lower it and everybody goes great, because of course everybody's going to say yes. We actually had to put it on the ballot to lower the UUT. But the original UUT was a supermajority and it was passed by the town. So I wouldn't characterize it as we've only voted to take things down. That was actually the council's request to sort of be in line with what Chris was saying, is let's not collect taxes that we're not going to spend.
What was you mentioned that if the council proposes it, then it requires a supermajority. This is a partial tax. But if residents,
Yeah, if it's a citizens and I'm not citizens
and how
initiative.
is that by petition or?
And I don't know the exact details, but yes, it's basically
Okay.
a citizens petition, and then it goes on the ballot,
Right.
and that requires a supermajority. I'm sorry, a simple majority rather than supermajority.
But what is proposed is adopted. So like we as a staff, like we can't do anything to look at it.
Yeah, that's
So,
right. Like
so it's whatever the citizens write up. And that passes, it's whatever's in that document.
I mean,
But
it's like,
there's also a threshold on that, which, I think the petition has to have some threshold.
a certain number, yeah, well, I mean.
Yeah,
it's
but
very
I'm
much
not
like-
certain what that is.
Yeah, it's.
25%, 50%,
Oh, it's,
something like
no,
that.
it's a pretty, it's actually, I don't know the exact number either. I think it's relatively small. I would ask,
Can-
as we're doing the pros and cons. if you look
All
at
right,
it,
we
Stan.
should look, we should.
No,
look
this is a
at that.
great idea to consider.
let's
Yeah,
do
I
some
hadn't thought of
research.
that.
Well,
If you
and
think about it, it's just like propositions with the state of California, right? Where
I
you're,
get it.
you know, you basically do a writing campaign, but as Tony's saying, whatever gets written in on the citizens initiative is the citizens initiative. It doesn't get to come to the council. We don't get to tweak it. Staff doesn't get to tweak it. The wording is whatever the wording is. So if we get down that path, then it's a matter of the citizens deciding to follow that path. But nevertheless, I think the finance committee can still evaluate that as a possible option.
And not to throw a monkey wrench in it, but the citizens initiative can be adopted by council.
Right. Yeah.
The
Yeah, we can-
citizens initiative, because at some point, the council needs to put it on the ballot. The council can choose to adopt it right there.
Okay, and my understanding there was if there's a large enough number of signatures on the petition. Anyway,
Yeah, that would be
that you
one of
can-
the factors.
right, that you could forego
Yeah.
an election, the council could just take
Adopt.
it. That was a much larger number, Chris, I think to your point, I think that was more like 50%, whereas I think just getting it on the ballot was a much smaller number. But again, I don't want to go into the details.
Yeah, it
Chris, so
seems
let's
like
proceed.
we should research this on our list of options.
Yeah, I agree.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. One thing I haven't heard, go ahead, Michelle.
no, I just wanted to say that Menlo Park is trying to protest parking, using some of their parking lots for low cost housing, and they're saying they need 10%. Well, assuming it's the same county, so I don't know whose rules. Yeah, so Mark is saying it's 10, yeah, and that's what Menlo Park is needing.
We're here.
So I haven't heard any recent mention of, not advocating for this, but the lease-back option. Is that, is, it's on the list of options.
It is still an option.
And is anyone doing analysis on that leading up to the next year's budget, or is that an action you're asking the finance committee?
Well, we're not taking any formal action on it because we haven't been told to, but it's not a complicated process. It's not a complicated process. We identify the amount we need, and then we find something to put up for collateral, and then contract gets signed and the money gets sent to us within the day.
Yeah, it sounds not complicated, but deciding what you put up for collateral, valuation of the collateral.
Right.
I mean, those things sound like,
But it's a pretty
someone needs to
straightforward
be
process.
thoughtful on that. So,
And the town did, when this town center was built, the county did do something similar. back
so
in-
who would own, defining that option? If we're defining other revenue options, I just want to make certain of the list, who's going to own that option? So it could be
I
fairly.
think the council's hoping this is going to be on the finance committee's pros and cons.
Okay.
That's- And,
Yeah,
and the
that's
other.
why I'm trying to be.
Yeah, no,
diligent
please, no,
here.
this is great. That's because,
Yeah.
we've talked through a lot of things. The goal was to have all the things you guys have talked about in the last year on one list with pros and cons.
By when?
Well, so when do we need, that's a question I wanted to make sure got answered tonight. So Tony, when does that need to be to the council?
Well, we can Because the 11th is going to be the, basically council's direction on where the budget's going for adoption. And if there is a conversation of including these revenue options, we can still do it, but have a further discussion in the next fiscal year, say in July or August, so that we can get, because if we do Chartertown, then we've got to get some type of committee set up right away. But I don't want to put pressure on the finance committee to give me something in 2 weeks.
No, yeah, I
You
think
know.
I want to separate out. I don't think
Yeah.
this upcoming budget, this is not for this upcoming budget.
Yeah.
Like, that's not the problem we're trying to solve. We're trying to solve the long-term structural issue. On the other hand, if we're going to get anything on the ballot in 2026, we need to move on this stuff. So, I mean, we don't need to do it in May, but we probably do need to do it in June, because, we're going to have to start going out and talking to citizens to see what they're interested in. So, and that's what the council needs. At some point, it's going to come before us, do we want to hire a consultant to help us think about these issues? And the question is, what issues do we want that consultant to help us think about? And the other one I want to make sure is on the list, as much as I hate to say it, is unincorporation. But I mean, on what you guys come back, what is the pro and what is the con of that, of having us unincorporate? And, because you talk about, we could be a special district, but then we lose our planning. And our planning is, I think, fundamental to the way this town looks today. So if that's under San Mateo County planning, you know what it's like when they plan in unincorporated county, right? They follow just the building codes. They have very few restrictions after that relative to the town. So, to me, in my mind personally, would be a con. That's what we're looking for, I think, when we're looking for pros and cons.
Yeah, that I agree. The last disincorporation, by the way, in California was Riverside in 1972,
Yeah, there you go.
which is something we discovered.
I mean, let's not be them. I mean, I'm not here to advocate that, but I want it on the list because
Yeah, it will be. What I can do, again, we wanted to meet with Rob Bartoli before
Sure.
We built this up, but I could take as an action item for me to look to the reports from the subcommittees from a few months back and put that into tabular form for a list for us to discuss at a meeting next month. We had a summary of where we were then, but we've added more items. We would just do a comprehensive table, which wouldn't be any new material. It would, except the stuff we learned from Rob Bartoli. But the point then would be that the subcommittee could discuss it, but then we would bring it to the full committee at the next meeting for a full discussion of, one sheet of paper, maybe both sides, depending how much we have. But will we be pros and cons?
Talk into the mic, please.
And then adopt them.
George, I recommend that we remove the lease back from this discussion because it is not a continuing source of revenue. It is fundamentally different than any of this. And it
It's
should not be
basically a loan.
thought of in the same breath.
It's basically a loan.
It's a loan, so it's not a continuing source of revenue. It's irrelevant
But-
to this.
Well, but let me just say, I think it should stay on the list, but the reason is, no, but hear me out for just a sec.
Yeah,
It's
sure.
not to fix our structural problems, 'cause I completely agree with you.
Right.
But it potentially gives us a little bit more runway to fix our structural problems.
Different issue.
If you need it.
But related, and I think the council needs that information as well. So if you want to put it in a little separate section, I'm fine with that. But I think
Okay.
it should still come to the council as, what are the pros and cons of leaseback? Because they're not zero, right? It's not just, well, here's free money. I mean, if we stop making payments on the loan, we lose that piece of property. So I mean, there are things that go with that.
Then it becomes permanent. It's a sale.
Well, Done, exactly.
Hey, Tony, can you remind me what the number is that we're trying to solve for with this, with all these various options? Would help inform kind of what makes sense and what
Minimum
doesn't.
1 million.
The man's been consistent,
Yeah.
looking for $1 million.
I know, keep saying, we keep asking.
Yeah,
hoping
we
for a
keep
lower
asking.
number.
And so, George, I think at your next meeting, sorry, I just want to close on
Yeah.
this and then I mean, if you guys had your, pros and cons ready for next meeting and then you had a full committee discussion,
Yeah.
and then it could come out of the committee, that seems like reasonable timing to me. I'd hate for it to be, now we have discussion, now we need to go back, and now we need to do more, and then we have to have another committee, because then I think we'll probably run down the clock. So
Yeah,
I
okay.
think it's reasonable for the June meeting for you guys to deliver. One suggestion I have is that everybody can legally, under the Brown Act, send all your things to George and to the subcommittee. You can't have a back and forth, but you can send them all to George and he can get them all on one piece of paper with all your comments and stuff. So you don't have to say, oh, I didn't know about this, right? So.
Yeah,
please-
that's great. If everyone could resend whatever you think is important to me so that I don't miss something as I go through what I already have. That'd be great. And then the three of us on this subcommittee that met with LAFCO yesterday, we can talk about this. And I'll do a first draft, which you then can all shred. And then we, again, the idea there is not for us to have the final agreed version because we'll do that here. Other than debate, what's a pro, what's a con. And as Craig said, I think it's very helpful that it's not our job to say, you should do this, right? Or we think this is the best, but it's more that life's about trade-offs here, how we see the trade-offs. And you guys get to make the decision, you being the town council.
And I'd also say, Mark, to your point, if you're the dissenting opinion, just like the Supremes do, write your dissenting opinion. I mean, because what we need is information. And so if you guys can come to consensus on pros and cons, great. But if you want to say, I dissent and here's why, and you couldn't get in the regular pros and cons, that's just as helpful.
I was just imagining reporters on the steps here of our schoolhouse talking about who wrote the dissent. And anyway, who knows? We may get there.
No, I appreciate that for the next meeting, this discussion. I do think, and actually I want to be respectful and responsive to Craig's request of this committee for today, because I do think it's important, which is the town council will be evaluating and adopting a budget on, as I understand it, on June the 12th, which they should in advance. I'm sorry, June what? June 25th. Therefore, this is really, we might have an opportunity before then, but I think that, will we have another meeting actually before June 25th? Okay, then actually, what I was about to say, then it should be this meeting, whether we reflect upon whether our recommendation to the town council would be for a balanced budget at 7.9 to equate to 7.9 revenue and expenses, or whether it would be advisable for perhaps 1 year to not skinny down the expenses too much, because expenses, they're really going to only come out of staff. And so therefore, I mean, this may be unexpected from me as a balanced budget guy, but maybe it may be for 1 year, maybe operating at a slight deficit is not such a bad thing. So, but if we don't have to discuss it today, maybe we put that on the agenda for next time. If it is before the town council meeting, for when they're going to have to decide whether to adopt a balanced budget or not for the upcoming fiscal year.
Right. The only thing I would add to that is we will be seeing the preliminary on the 28th.
No, the 11th.
June 11th. Okay. So again, I know this meeting's getting late. I mean, it's already, 6:40. So I'm not trying to put more on you guys, but any information that you can provide, I mean, I will take to the council. And I heard several things tonight that I will take to the council, sort of feedback from the finance committee. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. Would the members be supportive of a meeting, say in 3 weeks, like on the 16th or 17th of June? Okay. Yeah.
Good for me.
Okay, so maybe the 16th. Is that a Tuesday? That's a Monday. Does that work for you, Tony?
Oh, she's looking at that.
Oh, yeah.
Make sure the room's available.
Good, that's, gives me a deadline. 16th. Okay. Okay. Yeah.
they've seen numbers tonight. So, I mean, that's, if anything's gonna change, it's gonna be from those numbers they've seen. It'll be at the final. Just the timing of it.
So just to clarify, so at our next meeting, will the budget discussion be shorter then or pretty detailed? I guess I'm used to seeing, the whole, 20-page budget. You know what I mean? The more detailed, not that we need to see it, but, because sounds like there's these pros and cons
Well,
lists.
how about I can bring what more information that you're specifically looking for?
Well, no, I mean, just saying historically, again, I hate to be the historian on this committee, but, we get the 20, 30, 40 page, whatever, budget usually, not one page
Yeah,
summary.
You didn't have that last year.
We didn't, well, we didn't have, you weren't here last night.
I
Well,
wasn't
you
here.
were for one day.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be on the website before the budget gets adopted. But as far as the finance committee, I'm just gonna give you not detail, but here's the number.
Yeah, I think one page, revenue sources, expense category.
And
Okay.
it's gonna be,
That's all we really need.
and it's gonna be focused on the general fund. I mean, all the other funds are, I mean, it's. Right.
And I think it's really just one question. Do we, the committee, recommend to the town to adopt for the upcoming fiscal year a balanced budget or a deficit budget? The approximate amount of that deficit is about $200,000. And recognizing that the trade-off there is one actually would require more reduction in staff and one would be as we are today. Is that fair? Yeah. That's, yeah.
Okay. Great. So we'll, at the next meeting, we'll look at the budget. We'll opine on balanced budget, strictly balanced or potentially slightly out of balance. And we also will present a summary of all the work done to date with pros and cons and evaluate that, make some changes and then send that on.
And,
Right.
could you add, discussing, the focus on the audit, the timing of the audit? Whether to try and, I guess, move it up.
Well, yeah, what I'm proposing, item A is generally a finance update. It's not going to say finance and audit update, at least I would expect. And then we'll talk about the budget. And then we're going to talk about the pros and cons
Well, I think, well,
of these revenues.
as, I don't know, someone mentioned already, is to try and change either the focus or the priority of getting the audits done, to be ready for the, election in November of 26. Because right now, Tony's saying we'll just start the 25 audit. I believe
Yeah, I'm
next
not
May.
sure that that's within our control though, given that I
Well-
think it's Mays and Associates that are the big factor.
Well, it's a priority, right?
We're not their only client.
Yeah, okay, so it's their timeline, not ours?
Yeah, I mean, they're giving me windows.
Okay.
When it's outside of their normal audit schedule.
Yeah, this is my, my understanding for everyone here that the main, bottleneck we have right now are the Mays and Associates, our auditors' resources, right? Because they schedule various towns in the normal course and we're one of the smaller ones and find time to get our backlog audits done and they're complicated. Is that fair?
Yeah, I mean, they do have the resources, but it's just their windows for
Yeah.
when they can work on our audit outside of their normal client schedule. Because we are abnormal for them, because we are so far behind.
Right. Okay. Yeah, but we can't cover that, where we are.
I mean, it is a priority for me, but so's the budget.
Next, the only item of business left is future topics, and I think we covered that. So we sort of drifted into that item. Sorry about that. No further discussion on that. Any other business? Motion to adjourn?
So move. Second.
Okay. We adjourn. Thank you, everyone, at 6:45.